Hello again and welcome to another Mordian Glory Warhammer 40k video. In today's episode, we shall be doing a full-on review of the entire Astra Militarum faction for Warhammer 40k. This will cover every single army rule, every single data sheet, and every single FAQ that I can find, and will serve as a one-stop shop for all of your Astra Militarum needs. Each aspect will be given the thumbs up or thumbs down, and this won't just be based on Theory Hammer, but I will be throwing in a lot of my own hard-won battlefield experience in there as well. How I have found certain things to perform in a competitive meta environment. Now, before we dive into the video, there's one thing I just want to say. This is going to be a quick hot take on each datasheet, rule, etc. But I have actually spent the last 8 months since 10th edition was released doing individual deep dives on every single unit, every single datasheet for the Guard. So if there's a particular topic you want to know more about, if you want to know the nitty-gritty detail of one certain unit, then make sure you check the Mordian Glory archives, because you will be able to find that extra information in there. I've covered every unit, including the Forge World stuff as well. And all of that information has been consolidated under the playlist on this channel, which is Warhammer 40k 10th edition. And I will make sure that there is a link to that playlist down in the description below. Each aspect will be given the thumbs up or thumbs down, and this won't just be based on Theory Hammer, but I will be throwing in a lot of my own hard-won battlefield experience in there as well. How I have found certain things to perform in a competitive meta environment.
Attention, Guardsmen! The Commissariat has detected you have not yet liked this video. Do so immediately, or else you will face the Emperor's wrath. And anyone who has not yet subscribed to the channel will be transferred to the penal battalions. That is all. Move out!
Let's begin with a look at the Astra Militarum Army Rule, Voice of Command. This is your Guard orders. Orders are basically ways you can get your characters, such as your command squads, to hand out temporary buffs to the units around them. Now, there are some limitations on which officers can order which units. For example, you can only really have infantry officers order infantry units. You can only really have tank commanders order tanks, although the Lord Solar can order whoever he wants. But there are some units that can't receive orders in general, such as Auxiliate, like Ogrins and Bulgrins. Although, of course, the Lord Solar can, like I said, order whoever he wants. All of these little buffs that you can do are fantastic. Move adds 3 inches to the move characteristic of model in this unit. That means you can have your vehicles go from 10 inches to 13 inches and still fire. It doesn't stop you from firing. A big change from move in comparison to older editions where it's like it forced you to move and advance, but then you got like a bonus move and advance again. All of that's gone now. Very simple, just 3 inches extra move characteristic. Movement wins games. Move is often overlooked by new players because it doesn't give out huge damage dealing capabilities, but it is possibly the order that is going to win you the most games and allow you to score the most points. So it's an amazing order. After that, we've got Fix Bayonets. This gives you +1 to your weapon skill on your units. This one is definitely a fun one, more of a flavorful than a really powerful ability, and that's because Guard is fundamentally a shooting army. However, for Rule of Cool, being able to legitimately cry "Fix Bayonets" and actually have that mean something is awesome. We've then got Take Aim, possibly the best order after Move. This gives you +1 to your ballistic skill. Incredible. Like I said, we're a shooting army, so anything that helps us shoot better is good. Also, Guard tends to suffer from ballistic skill 4+, and that just isn't enough. Going from hitting on a 4+ to a 3+ might just seem like, oh, you're just hitting a bit better, but it makes a huge difference in real terms on the tabletop. As a good rule of thumb, if you're not sure, if you're ever in doubt, take aim. After that, we've got first rank fire, second rank fire. This is an okay order. I feel it's a little bit more thematic. It kind of plays second fiddle to take aim. You improve the attack characteristic of rapid-fire weapons equipped by models in this unit by 1. This means that your las guns and your plasma guns and things like your hotshot volley guns will get an extra shot. That's okay, but it's only affecting certain weapons, unlike Take Aim, which is affecting everything. Doesn't matter if it's rapid fire or not. And on top of this, it doesn't really solve the number one problem that Guard has, which is only hitting on 4+. The first rank fire is cool if you want to throw more shit at the wall, but Take Aim is what you want to do if you want those shots to actually stick. After that, we've got Take Cover, improve the save characteristics of models in this unit by 1. To be clear, this does affect you in close combat, and also it does stack with Cover. What Cover is not the same as Take Cover. Take Cover is a specific guard buff that you're doing via your orders. Cover is the core mechanic in the Warhammer 40k book. So yes, you can stack both. Yes, that means you can have guardsmen going from a 5+ save up to a 3+ save. Yes, that basically gives you guardsman power arm. However, as potent as it has the potential to be, most guard players will find the best way of protecting themselves is by blowing the enemy off the table, so you'll more than likely want to default towards Take Aim. Finally, we've got Duty and Honor, improve the leadership and objective control characteristics of models in this unit by 1. This is decent, it's okay, it's situational. Sometimes you will need to increase the OC just so you can hold an objective or deny your opponent that objective when he's trying to score primary points in his turn. However, Guard don't tend to struggle with having masses of objective control, especially with our cheap OC intensive infantry. Overall, I think that the voice of command rule is really good. Yes, it can suffer a bit with battle shock, but generally it's handing out lots and lots of good buffs. Some of them are more situational, but many of them are going to be good no matter what you encounter. I would, in terms of smashing and passing individual orders, I would smash move, 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 pass fixed bayonets, smash take aim, pass first rank fire, smash take cover, and pass duty and honor. But honestly, they're all pretty good. Sadly, the same cannot be said for the Astra Militarum combined regiment detachment rule born soldiers. Each time an Astra Militarum unit from your army remains stationary until the end of the turn, range, weapons, equipment models in that unit have the lethal hits ability. Considering that movement wins games, this rule is massively counterproductive. A lot of new players are going to fall into the trap of staying still because they want to get their lethal hits. That will mean you're not pushing onto primary. That will mean it will tempt you away from doing your secondaries. Born soldiers I see as a nice to have. Sometimes I'll be in the privileged position of being able to stay still with a frontline unit, and then I'll get some lethal hits. But mostly, this is a rule that benefits your indirect fire. Things like your basilisks and your artillery, and means that they can stay still and still shoot, so they still get their lethal hits. But outside of your indirect fire, this thing rarely pops up, and is a bit of a disappointment. Speaking of disappointments, the guard enhancements are really nothing to write home about. The Death Mask of Alonia's Pious is 10 points, and it allows you to subtract 1 from the objective control characteristic of models in that unit instead of changing it to 0. The big thing is that Battle Shock doesn't really do much, it's not very impactful in 10th edition, and also this massively overlaps with your regimental standard that you can get in your platoon and your Acadian command squads, and you will more than likely be taking those command squads. So why wouldn't you just take a regimental standard which is free rather than spend 10 points on something to do the same job? Yeah, leave it at home. It is a huge pass. Also, speaking of passes, you've got Drill Commander, possibly the biggest missed opportunity in the index. Officer model only, while the bearer is leading a unit, each time model in that unit makes a ranged attack. If that unit remains stationary this turn, a critical hit is scored on a successful unmodified hit of roll of 5+. Basically, it's going to make your lethal hits from born soldiers go off on a 5+, but you have to stay still, and movement wins games. So again, this is a trap. It's encouraging people to stay still. Also, I see a lot of players make mistakes around this. The model has to be leading a unit. So you can't have someone with Drill Commander in a Tank Commander, for example. He's not leading anyone, so he doesn't benefit from it. You also can't have this on a Scion Commander, deep striking down in a big squad of Scions, because deep striking counts as having moved. You can't have this on an officer near some artillery and have their lethal that goes off, because he's not leading the artillery. So it's a huge trap. Do not bother with it. I see this come up in lists all the time, and it's generally put in by people who are getting it wrong or who have misunderstood how it can really be used effectively. And the answer is it can't be used effectively. So there you go. We've also got Kurov's Aquila. This is also for an officer model only. Once per battle, just after your opponent's used a stratagem, the bearer can use this enhancement. If it does, until the end of the battle, the CP cost of your opponent must pay to use that stratagem, again, is increased by 1. This was decent, if not very expensive, at 40 points until the recent FAQ, which changed it to only affecting battle tactic stratagems. So basically, CP reroll. There are some alright battle tactic stratagems that are unique to certain factions, but by and large, that FAQ killed this enhancement. Do not bother with Kurov's Aquila, it's very expensive. Before the FAQ, it was 50-50 on whether it was worth it or not. After the FAQ, it's absolutely not. Leave it on the shelf, don't put it in your list. But to end on a positive note, Grand Strategist is pretty much an auto-include. It's the last enhancement, and in your command phase, the officer can issue 1 additional order. Amazing. More orders equals more buffs, equals more potential damage output, equals more potential movement shenanigans. Grand Strategist is one that you can put in your army nearly every single time and will always get some utility out of it. And things continue to look up when we get to the stratagems, because pretty much all of these are either incredible or just downright good. Firstly, we have, in my opinion, the best stratagem in the Guard, if not one of the best stratagems in the entire game, reinforcements. This allows you to bring a unit back from the dead. Essentially, when one of your regiment units is destroyed, just before it is destroyed, you get to spend 2 command points and it goes back into strategic reserve. It does count as an entirely fresh unit, so if you've got things like Votan Judgment tokens on you and stuff like that, they go away. It is a whole new unit coming back, but that unit coming back is identical. So, for example, if you have a unit of 20 Catan Jungle Fighters and they've got 4 Flamers and 2 Voxcats and 2 Sergeants, and they all get wiped out, before they get wiped out, you spend 2 CP and you basically get a new unit in strategic reserve. And that new unit is going to be identical to those Catachans. So again, 20 guys, 2 Sergeants, 2 Voxcatters, and 4 Flamers. In a similar style, we've got Fields of Fire. This is an incredible stratagem, one that you will make use of pretty much every single game. Essentially, it allows you to stack additional AP onto enemy units. This allows you to do more damage, and doing damage is always a good thing in games of 40k. The only issue you might encounter is that you have a limited amount of command points, so you might struggle to do reinforcements and Fields of Fire, but there are lots of ways that you can make sure that you have all the CP for all of the shenanigans that you want to do. Specifically, Creed lets you basically get Fields of Fire for free every single turn, but we'll get into that when we get to Creed's datasheet. Another good stratagem is Suppression Fire. This allows you to debuff enemy units by getting one of your infantry units to target an enemy unit as long as it's not a monster or a vehicle, and apply a -1 to hit modifier to the enemy unit. So when they try and shoot you back, they'll be at -1. It's decent, but it's a shame you can only do it with your infantry, and it's a shame it only affects basically other enemy infantry as well. But you don't need line of sight, so you can have a unit of mortars laying down suppression fire, and it will be good in certain situations. It's a tool to have in the toolbox. It's one that you'll often forget about, but when it does crop up, it'll have a big impact. We then get to the only bad stratagem, which is Expert Bombardiers. It allows one of your units with the Voxcaster to look at an enemy unit, and then any Astra Militarum model in your army, which is an indirect fire weapon, that targets that enemy unit gets +1 to hit, as long as they're not battle shocked. The thing is, you've got plenty of +1 to hit modifiers already. You've got the fact that most of your vehicle artillery is heavy. Most of your infantry artillery is heavy as well, which gives it a +1 to hit modifier. And then you've also got Take Aim as an order, which gives you +1 to your ballistic skill. So Expert Bombardiers is just kind of redundant. You don't really need it. And you can't stack too many to hit modifiers as well. So, I mean, I think you could have the +1 to hit modifier from heavy, and that would cancel out the -1 to hit modifier from indirect, and then you could add back in the +1 to hit modifier from Expert Bombardiers, and then you could stack that with the fact that Take Aim affects your ballistic skill characteristic. So you probably could have most of your artillery hitting on 2s if you wanted to. It's okay, But like I said, CP is at a premium, and you've already got 2 really good ones with reinforcements and with fields of fire. In my experience, expert bombardiers just isn't very good, and it's often such a low priority that you never end up spending CP on it. So it's a big pass for me. We've then got another situational stratagem, which is good, but it's not going to come up all the time. Inspired Command allows you to do an order in your opponent's command phase. Now, this would absolutely be an auto include if it was just 1 CP, do an extra order. In your own command phase, just do an extra order, but it's not. As a result, the only time you're really going to use this is if you have moved onto an objective that's out in the open in your turn, and then you're worried that you won't be able to hold that objective against the enemy sort of shooting or combat, so you then use Inspired Command to give one of your units take cover. So they can then have a movement bonus in your turn and then a defensive bonus in your opponent's turn. That's really the only time you're going to use it. So it's situational, but when it does crop up, it is a nice buff to be able to throw out. Finally, we have another brilliant stratagem, which is Armored Might. You do it in your opponent's shooting phase just after the enemy selects a target. You do it on one of your vehicles, and it allows you to reduce the damage characteristic of the enemy attacks by 1. Basically, it's -1 damage on your vehicle. It's good. The thing is that it's much better on paper than in reality. In my experience, you're going to be spunking all your CP into, again, I've already mentioned, but I'll say it again, reinforcements. You're going to be spunking all your CP into fields of fire. You're just not really going to have much left over for Armored Might. So it is a very good stratagem, don't get me wrong, but it's kind of like 3rd on the podium. And if you have the CP built up to use it, then great. But typically what I tend to do with my vehicles is I don't have 2 CP left over. I've got 1 CP left over. And that allows me to do like smoke from the core rulebook. And that kind of is all the defensive buffs that I need. But Armored Might is one to be aware of if you have some CP left over. In summary, all the stratagems except 1 are good. But if you had to twist my arm, I would say reinforcements, smash, smash, smash. Fields of fire, smash, smash, smash. Suppression fire, pass. Expert bombardiers, mega pass. Inspired Command, smash. Armored Might, pass. Now we start getting to the data sheets, and we're going to begin with the head honcho, Lord Solar Leontus. This guy is a clear smash. He has got good stat line for a guard character. He's all right in terms of his offensive capabilities, but he is a huge force multiplier. You get an extra CP every turn just by taking him, which is going to fuel all of those reinforcements, all of those fields of fire, and he also can do 3 orders to any Astra Militarum unit. And this really is the #1 reason you're going to take him, because he is the only guy that can order super heavies, he's the only guy that can order Bullgrin, and he's just a very efficient source of orders. Combine him with a platoon command squad so that you can use the Master Vox in that other unit, and you've got possibly the best source of orders in the entire index. He is almost an auto include. Outside of very specific builds such as Met Guard, you are going to put this guy in your list. Our next named character is Ursula Creed, and despite the fact that she is nowhere near as sexy as Daddy Creed from previous editions and looks a bit like a lunch lady, she is a definite smash in terms of what she brings to the tabletop. You don't really care about her stat line or her weapons. She's very cheap at 55 points and brings loads of unit buffs to the table. Firstly, she can do 2 orders, so she's very efficient on the order front. Secondly, she can do 2 orders on her own unit that she's leading, which means when you combine with Kazakin, you can just get ridiculous amounts of orders and have a super tooled up unit. And finally, she lets you do fields of fire for free every turn. Quick thing around Tactical Genius, which is the ability that lets you do that. There have been a couple of FAQs that affect this. Firstly, you can only do it on a regiment unit. It doesn't say that on her data sheet, but it does say that in the FAQ. Secondly, you can only do it on battle tactics, which for the guard is, well, your CP reroll and fields of fire. Most people are going to use Ursula Creed to get 3 fields of fire every single turn, and that's the way you should be thinking about her as well. Our next character is the Cadian Castellan. He is not an epic hero, so you can take up to 3 of them in your list, and he's okay. He is 45 points. He's got a pretty basic stat line. He can get some alright war gear like plasma pistols and power fists. But the thing is, he's what I think makes him a pass for most guard armies, even though he is quite good, is he's quite limited in what he can lead. He can only lead Cadian shock troops, infantry squads, or Kazakin. And he only does one order. His abilities are quite good with senior officer, allowing you to get sustained hits and get back in the fight, allowing you to shoot and fall back, or fall back and shoot, I should say. But the thing is that you've already got lots of orders, but basically cheaper. The Lord Solar can do 3 orders, Creed can do 2 orders, and by the time you've included those 2 in your list, there's not really much need for the Cadian Castellum. So I want to be 100% clear on something here. He is a good model. He is not bad. He is just a pass because there are other better units for you to take. In a similar vein, we've got the Tank Commander. This is not an infantry character. This is a dude riding around in a Lehman Russ. So you get all the benefits of being in a tank. You've got a very defensive stat line, and you've got lots and lots of good guns. His ability, a death befitting an officer, is cool. Basically, when he dies on a 2+ before you remove him, he gets to shoot. But the big problem with the Tank Commander is he only does 1 order. So why would you take the Tank Commander who costs more than the Lord Solar, and he can only do 1 order, when you would just take the Lord Solar and do 3 orders? The Tank Commander is one of those units which is a pass for most people. But there are a couple of situations when you might want to smash him. Firstly, if you're taking a lot of tanks, you can take a Tank Commander and then give him Grand Strategist so he can do 2 orders. This is basically the only way to run one. And if you're doing that, you can combine it with the Lord Solar, and suddenly you've got 5 tank orders. That's a lot of buffs for your vehicles. The other way that you might want to use him is in a mechanized army. I have found that when you're running a lot of chimeras and stuff, the Tank Commander really comes into his own, because you're already spending lots of points on armor and you're already taking a lot of Lehman Russes. So basically upgrading a Russ for a few points to Tank Commander is a good way to do it. But for the vast majority of people, he is an inferior choice to the Lord Solar. But being a bit more positive for a moment, we then get to one of my favorite units, which is the Platoon Command Squad. Holy moly, I could go on for days and days about this unit. It's incredibly flexible, it has lots and lots of war gear options, and it is basically an auto-include. If you are taking the Lord Solar, you need to take the Platoon Command Squad for one simple reason. The Lord Solar can use the Master Vox of the Platoon Command Squad. This means that the Lord Solar's orders go from a 6-inch range, which is very, very short, to a 24-inch range. The way you make this happen is you form what I like to call the Lord Solar Command Blob, or the Supreme Command Blob. Take a unit of Catachans. Take a Platoon Command Squad. Doesn't matter what war gear you've got in there, as long as one of the guys has got a Master Vox. Take the Lord Solar. Your battle line infantry, like Catachans, can have 2 leaders attached to them. So you attach the Platoon Command Squad and you attach the Lord Solar. Now, rules as written, the Lord Solar can benefit from the Master Vox. There are literally dozens of reasons why you would take Platoon Command Squad, but for that one reason alone, it's an absolute auto-include in the vast majority of your guard armies. In a similar vein, we have got the Cadian Command Squad. In my opinion, Cadian Command Squads are inferior to Platoon Command Squads. And this comes down to one simple reason. They can only lead Cadian shock troops. Also, they're 5 points more. Also, their loadout's a little bit limited. Cadian Command Squads fall into the same camp as your Cadian Castellans. They're not a bad unit. If you have a load of Cadian Command Squads, don't despair. They're great. They're like a 9 out of 10 still. But the Platoon Command Squad is a 10 out of 10. So they're a great unit, they're just overshadowed. And so being ruthless, and just look at this from a competitive point of view, they are a pass. But I tell you who isn't a pass. I tell you who is a goddamn hero. And for me, personally, an auto-include in every goddamn list and every goddamn game. It is the man, the myth, Colonel Iron Hand Strachan. I have a sordid love affair with this model. I use him in all of my tournaments. If you ever see one of my tournament reports, I take Strachan, and I always try and have a little running tally of what he can kill. And oh boy, does he kill. Strachan is but a man. But he is a man that has essentially the same stat line as a Space Marine Smash Captain. He's just a beast. And his damage output is deceptively awesome. If you send him into combat with something, he's probably going to kill it. And on top of this, he could do 2 orders, and he's only 55 points. Creed might be a big force multiplier, but Strachan is a one-man army. He is an absolute smash in my army for one simple reason. Not only is he good at orders, but he actually is a ton of fun to use. It's so good having a guard character that feels capable. But on top of this, from a more serious point of view, he adds just a little bit of seasoning to the list. He allows you to actually do combat. Unless you're willing to spend a lot of points on things like Bulgrin, guard armies tend to struggle with combat. And often you just need a pinch of it. Just a little bit to have another tool in the toolbox. And for 55 points, Strachan fulfills that requirement. So I think he's an auto-include because not only is he just a damn good officer, but he also gives you some extra flexibility. Next up is the Primaris Psyker. This is a pass for me. I have played around with these guys, and they do have some capability of making your blobs very durable, and they can put out some decent damage with their Psychic Maelstrom, but they're too expensive. 60 points is just too much. And if you start trying to combine these guys with Feel No Pain, you're going to end up with blobs of infantry which are costing 250 points. Way too expensive. Sadly, Primaris Psyker is okay, but too many points. Gaunt's Ghosts is our next unit, and these are a smash. Now, they've got loads of different weapons and stat lines, and they can be a bit of a confusing unit, but there's a very simple way to basically use them. Score points. They have a rule, Covert Stealth Team, which means at the end of your opponent's turn, if they're not in engagement range, you can pick them up, put them in reserve, and then bring them back in your next movement phase. This means that from turn 1 onwards, you can be bouncing around the map, scoring tactical objectives like behind enemy lines and teleport to Homer. They are expensive at 100 points, but they are very good. And so I definitely say they're a smash. Regimental Attaches are a pass. They are cool, and they do bring some decent abilities, but most of them are kind of situational. The Artillery Commander gives you sustained hits. Alright, something to write home about. Aeronautical Commander gives your planes +1 to hit, but planes are terrible. And the Divination from the Astropath is good, but Inquisitorial Warbands could do it better with their Mystics. So, Attaches, leave them at home. The Ogren Bodyguard is just terrible. I'm not even going to go into it. Don't bother with him. He doesn't work. There's a lot of people that think the Ogren Bodyguard gives the whole unit to the 6. That's not the case. He does not get to give the whole unit to a 6. In fact, if he joins a command squad that then joins a blob of infantry, he becomes toughness 3. So, yeah, big pass there. And likewise, the same for Nork Dead Dog. A shame, both of these in the past have been very cool, but in 10th edition, Ogren Bodyguards of all varieties are a waste of time. That covers most of the main index characters. Now we're going to start getting into the real units, and we're getting to my favorite part, the infantry corps. Every day in the corps is like a day on the farm. Every meal a banquet, every paycheck a fortune, every formation a parade. I love the corps. And our first battle line infantry unit is the generic infantry squad. These are okay. If you've got them, use them. But there are better choices. Most guard players have a lot of infantry squads. If they're a veteran guard player, I should say, because for a long time they were really the only infantry choice we had. But now there are just better ones, as you will see in a moment. Overall, infantry squads are a pass for me. I rarely take them. In the same sort of category, we have Cajun Shock Troops. Again, not a bad unit. Totally usable. A solid 8 out of 10 when looked at in isolation. But there are just other infantry which do the job better. And their Shock Troops ability is kind of meh. Just not that exciting. Essentially, they're a fast-moving unit of infantry. They don't have heavy weapons, and they're meant to bring lots of special weapons to the table. But unfortunately for them, there is another infantry choice which does the same job much, much better, and that is Death Korps of Krieg. Death Korps of Krieg are slightly more expensive. It's 10 points more for a squad of 20 of them, over a squad of 20 Cadians, but they come with more special weapons. Their sergeants can actually take good equipment. They have better war gear in the form of the Death Korps Medipack, and their ability is incredible. If you take Grim Demeanor and combine it with Take Aim, you have Guardsmen that are hitting on a 2+. So if you're ever going to take Cadian Shock Troops, that's fine, but just know for 10 points more, you could be taking Death Korps and you'll be getting a lot more out of them. And then we have our final battle line choice, which is the Kachan Jungle Fighters. On the surface, these guys seem like a pass. I mean, their sergeants can't even take chainswords. Their sergeants are a downright nerf over just taking a regular lasgun guy. But these guys are an absolute smash. I'm not just saying that because of the big muscles. I'm saying it because of one simple reason. They have the scout's ability. They can scout move 6 inches. This is huge. It allows you to push into the middle of the board early, allows you to get onto objectives quickly, allows you to screen out enemy assault units. It is a rare day that I leave home without my jungle fighters, and it's nothing to do with their weapons or their war gear. It's everything to do with the fact that A, they are cheaper, there are only 110 points for 20 of them, and B, more importantly, they are scouts. Important side note here. If you're someone that takes a lot of Cadian shock troops and you're like, I swear by Cadians because they're a nice middle choice and it's 120 points per 20, you're not actually saving any points. Because if you've got someone who's taking, let's say you've got 4 blobs of infantry in your army and you take each one of those as Cadians or infantry and it's like 120 points for each blob, right? Well, if you compare that to someone who's taking 2 units of Death Korps of Krieg and 2 units of Kachan Jungle Fighters, well, sure, 2 of their blobs are 10 points more expensive, but 2 of their blobs are 10 points cheaper. And so it's actually just as efficient to take, in terms of points, to take 2 blobs of Death Korps and 2 blobs of Kachans than it is to take 4 blobs of infantry or Cadians. And the Kachans are amazing because they're scouts, and the Death Korps are just better than those other infantry. So that's why whenever I build a competitive list, the first 2 things that I basically put into it are 40 Death Korps and 40 Jungle Fighters. We then have another character, and this is Sly Marbo. Sly Marbo is an absolute badass in the lore, but unfortunately on the tabletop, I don't like him. I rarely find a reason to take him. It just doesn't seem like he brings much to the table. He's got like some potential to assassinate characters, but it's so easy to counter precision that really he's a big no for me. He used to be able to disappear off the table and go up and down like Gaunt's Ghost, but he can't do that anymore. So for me, Sly Marbo gets left at home. Side note, he is technically a regiment unit, so when he dies, you could spend 2 CP on reinforcements to bring him back, but you're never going to do that. Because he's not that good, and you're much better off spending that 2 CP bringing back like 20 infantry. It's just funny to know that you can do it. And then we have Kazakin. Oh boy, do I want to smash Dem Kazakin. When these guys first came out at the beginning of 10th edition, I wasn't so hot on them, but the more I've looked at them, the more I've used them, the more impressed I've become with them. At 100 points, they are eminently spammable as elite infantry, and their warrior elite ability plus creed allows you to have 1 squad with 3 orders, which is just awesome. On top of this, scout moves, and we've already said how good scout infantry are. And then they've got the Melter Mine, which is a really good little bit of war gear that lets you threaten vehicles with them. Overall, there is a lot to like about Kazakin. They come with all of the gear and they have a good idea of how to use it. Another character next, Regimental Preacher. Fun, fluffy, passable. Gives you sustained hits in combat. You don't really want to be in combat. You could add him on to Kachans, but he hasn't got scout. So then he stops them from doing the best thing that they do, which is scouting. So he is cool, but a pass. Then we have Sergeant Harker. Similar sort of situation. Cool, but a pass. He's got a decent profile. He is toughness 4, but he hasn't really got any invulnerable save. He does have a 6 up feel no pain. All right. The main thing about Harker is he is 40 points for 1 order, and that's actually very cheap. That's actually cheaper than a Caden Castellan, but he can only order Katachan jungle fighters. Another cool thing about him is he is wielding a heavy bolter, and he does have scouts, so you can add him onto a Katachan unit to give them an order, and then still be able to scout with them, and then give them an actual bit of firepower too. Harker's Hellraisers is quite a useful ability. It means that the unit that he's leading basically gets -1 to hit as long as the enemy is over 12 inches away, which is alright. But the fun thing that he does is payback time, or as I like to call it, Harkin time. I like it when Harker went, it's Harkin time, and then Harkered all over the enemy. Basically allows you to take his heavy bolter and make it have 6 attacks rather than 3, and you get sustained hits 3 as well. Yeah, it's very, very, very fun. It's very cool, but it's once per battle, and it feels great to do it, but it rarely achieves much. Harker is one of those guys that you're going to put in your army if you're taking a themed Katachan army, but other than that, he is a pass. Next, we have the Regimental Engineer. That's right, the Guard also gets to take some Adeptus Mechanicus units. We've got our own Cogboys. A lot of people think these are a smash. I say they're a pass. The big thing that they do is they can give one of your vehicles a 4+ invulnerable save. But most Guard vehicles have a 2+ armor save. And in competitive boards, it's really, or just the fact that you've got the smoke stratagem, it's really easy to give your vehicle cover. That means if someone hits you with an AP -3 weapon, you're still on a 4+ armor save. Someone has to hit you with AP -4 in order to finally knock you down to a 5+ armor save and start making that Omnicized Blessing 4+ invulnerable relevant. But the thing is, a lot of AP -4 weapons, not all, but the vast majority, tend to either be short range or close combat. For example, you've got your melter guns. But your Guard vehicles are long range. They want to be staying back. They don't want to be getting up close. If someone's getting into melter range of your tanks, something has gone wrong. So I'm not a fan of the Engineer because I don't think that his invulnerable save brings anywhere near as much to the table as a lot of people think it does. So for me, I leave him at home. I've left him at home after using him a couple of times at tournaments. Not used him about 6 months, and I've not missed him even slightly. Munitorum Servitors are the helpers of the Tech Priests, and so by association, they are a pass. They don't really do anything very well, but there is one very niche situation when they can be kind of good, and that's in a combat Guard army, but that is the definition of a meme build, and so outside of that, and looking at it competitively, they're a pass. The Commissar. Now, I'm going to get bland for saying this, but he's a pass. He's cheap at 30 points, but his summary execution, it helps protect you against Battle Shock, but Battle Shock just doesn't really have much impact. Political Overwatch, again, lets you reroll Battle Shock if he's in the same unit as another officer, but then you're like double stacking officers, and yeah, nah. Because he's so focused on Battle Shock shenanigans, and Battle Shock doesn't really do much, he's not really very good. And he is compounded. This is compounded by the fact that he can only do 1 order, and he can only do Duty and Honor and Fixed Bayonets, which are 2 very, very situational orders. If I was to fix the Commissar, I would allow him to lead Auxilia, and allow him to order Auxilia. If he could do that, he would be an auto include, because you'd have Bulgrins running around led by Commissars, telling them to fix bayonets when they want to smash things, and giving them Duty and Honor, give them extra OC, which is one of the problems with Bulgrin. But he can't do any of that shit, so he's a pass. Speaking of Auxilia, we then have Ogrins. Ogrins are really cool, and I actually think they're really good. I've used them a number of times, both in casual and competitive games, and they've never let me down. They're very cheap, and they come with good firepower, and they're half decent in combat as well. The only issue with them is, even though they are quite big and chonky, they just die. 5+ save and a 6 of feel no pain. even with 3 wounds and toughness 6, they're just getting scythed down. Big reason for that is how much anti-tank is in the meta, and you can launch a las cannon into an ogre and it's not actually a bad idea. But they are cheap, and they do give good combat, and they do give good shooting. So I'm going to give them a smash. I've used them competitively, and they have worked. Likewise, we then have Bulgrin. Bulgrin are a funny unit, and when I first looked into them, and when I first used them, I said they were a pass. But I now retract that statement and believe that they are a smash. If you look at Bulgrin as a way to do damage in combat, you're looking at them the wrong way. These guys don't necessarily do a lot of damage, they just tank a lot of damage, and they're a totally viable alternative to a big 20-man blob of infantry. They are only 160 points for a big squad of them. They're going to come with a shed load of wounds, and they come with a 4+ invulnerable save, which is a premium in the guard. Sure, that's the only save they're really getting, is that 4+ invuln, but it's good. They also have a 6 of feel no pain, and they reduce damage. So don't expect them to do damage, but they can take them, and they're good for screening and stopping assault armies, for moving on to objectives and holding them. And you can, with the Lord Solar, give them duty and honor, which gets them better OC. So there's a lot to like about them. They are good blockers and objective holders and takers. Our last abhuman unit is the Rattling Snipers. On paper, they look good with being able to jump, shoot, jump. Their sniper rifles are pretty powerful, and they can infiltrate. But once you've paid for your infantry, your characters, your tanks, and your artillery, you're not going to have the points left over for them. They are a unit good in theory, but in reality one that's rarely going to see the tabletop, and so they're a pass. Our next unit is the Element Rough Riders. On paper, again, these guys have a lot to offer. The fact that they've had a points reduction, the fact they've got a 12-inch movement, and movement wins games, and that they have 2 wins each. These guys should be the equivalent of fast-moving infantry squads. The big issue is not the Element Rough Riders, it's terrain. Most competitive boards are festooned with ruins, and being cavalry, your Rough Riders have to go around. This means that in reality, that movement of 12 often gets eaten up, having to go the long route, whereas your infantry with move, being able to go 9 inches, can go straight through the walls, can often move as far, if not further. So they're not a bad unit. And there is definitely some play, and I've seen some people even mass lots and lots of Rough Riders and the Forgeable Death Riders, but I think you are going to be better off taking infantry. But now let's start looking at some guard vehicles. And the Imperial Guard, the Emperor's true finest, have a lot of good metal boxes. And we're going to begin on a high note with the Scout Sentinels. These are a smash. They're a very, very good unit. Most guard players will find good reason to include them in their lists. Firstly, they're relatively affordable at 60 points each. You can take them up to squadrons of 3, so you can have 3 of them for 180 points in one unit. They're a good force multiplier, with their daring recon ability giving reroll 1s and allowing you to get around some of the indirect fire problems too. Their firepower is not to be overlooked. They can bring las cannons, and in a meta of vehicles, the more anti-tank you can bring, the better. They also get hunter-killer missiles, which so you can have an opening barrage of like 3 las cannons and 3 hunter-killer missiles from a squadron of 3 scout sentinels. The big thing for me though is they are scouts. We've all talked about how good that is, and also that they have got both the squadron and the regiment keyword. This means they can receive orders from your infantry officers. So those valuable tank orders that you can only get from your Lord Solar and your tank commander, you don't need to use them on Scout Sentinels. Creed can order them. Strachan can order them. So they've got firepower, they've got force multiplier, they're eligible for reinforcement stratagem because they've got the regiment keyword. There's a lot of good stuff about them. The way I would think of them is they kind of ride the line between infantry and vehicles. If you are someone who wants to run some infantry, but not to like end up with like 100+ bodies, that's a lot of building and painting to do, you could, instead of taking what I believe is like the 4 sort of mandatory infantry blobs, you could happily take a couple of infantry blobs and then like a unit of Bulgarin and then a unit of Scout Sentinels. And that would essentially fulfill your requirements to have lots of screening and lots of infantry and lots of ability to take objectives. Sadly, the same could not be said about the Armored Sentinels. On paper, they look pretty good. The big issue with them is they're expensive. 70 points each means that for 3 of them, if you want to take 3 of them to be able to get some decent damage, it's going to cost you 210 points. That's more than a Lehman Russ. And I think Lehman Russes are bringing more firepower to the table than these guys. They're okay, but they're overshadowed. In the same boat, we have the Hellhound. It is a good tank, and it's greatly improved. It's T10, 2+ save, 11 wounds, and Flush Them Out allows you to remove cover from the enemy unit. But its damage output is pretty swingy, considering nearly all of its weapons have got random shots. And whilst ignoring cover is decent, Guard have got multiple ways of just increasing the AP. You've got the Lemus Exterminator, which we'll see later on, and you've got Fields of Fire. And often those can act as pseudo ignore cover, and they're always better, because ignore cover doesn't work on a unit that's out in the open, but extra AP does. And you might think you can combine Flush Them Out and extra AP, but in most competitive games, you're going to bump into an invulnerable save well before stacking on 2 extra AP and ignores cover is really going to be relevant. So unfortunately, the Hellhound falls into the category that we're seeing with a lot of Guard units, which is you can put them in your list, you won't be actively detrimentally affecting your army, but there are better choices. And one of those said better choices is the frankly incredible Rogel Dawn battle tank. In my humble opinion, this is the best tank in Warhammer 40k right now, not just in the Guard. At T12, it is bouncing las cannons 50% of the time. It's got a 2+ save and 18 wounds, so it is tanky. You're going to have to slam serious AT into this thing if you want to hurt it. And even if you do, it's got ablative plating. Once per game, when a shot comes at it, it could just go 0 damage. So if someone hits you with like a Knight's Volcano Lance, you're like 0 damage. Really, really difficult to kill one of these. I've had them take the entire firepower from Votann gun lines and just come through. Not unscathed, but come through. The only time I've ever lost one of these things in a tournament was when I played it very, very badly. So there is no defense against my Ogre Brain generalship sometimes. But with a brilliant defense stat line, very, very powerful weapons in the form of the Oppressor Cannon and the Pulverizer Cannon and all the multi-melters, it's got firepower, it's got durability, and at 260 points, it is a very affordable vehicle. Taking a break from the tanks for a moment, we do have some support infantry choices. The first one is the Heavy Weapons Squad. These are both a smash and a pass. If you equip them with anything that is not mortars, they're a pass. They're too fragile, they'll just die. If you equip them with mortars, they are a smash. Very, very cheap source of indirect fire. Yep, it is anti-infantry indirect, and we are on a meta vehicles, but with those lethal hits, you can stack on some good wounds. I tend to find that if I need to squeeze in an extra artillery piece into my army, I can't quite afford things like Basilisk or Medusa, I'll happily put in some mortars. I've used them competitively, and they don't blow me away, but they never let me down. They're good. A similar thing can be said for the Field Ordnance Battery. If you give them the direct fire bombast cannons or Midas rocket launcher, pass. Too fragile, too slow, they'll just die before they do anything. Give them bombast field guns, and they're a good unit. Unfortunately, even with the bombast field gun, they are overshadowed. Medusas from Forge World, Basilisk, Earthshaker carriages, they are all better than the Field Ordnance Battery. So even in its indirect fire form, it is a bit of a pass. But if you're just getting started out and you've got some combat patrol boxes and you've got some of these guys and that you need some artillery and they're the only artillery you've really got, then put the bombast field gun on them and they will at least allow you to shoot indirectly in some form. But back to the good part, we're looking at some more tanks again. And there is, next up, the venerable, the El Clasico Leman Russ Battle Tank. This is a smash, and it has always been a smash. The Leman Russ Battle Tank is not necessarily the best tank in 10th edition, but it is immortal. It has always been usable. I've been using Leman Russ Battle Tanks since 3rd edition, all the way up till 10th edition. 20 years these things have been in my army, and they've always been good. They have never been the most meta. They have never been the most efficient. But they're a unit that you can buy and include in your army and always be able to field it, and it'll be able to do something. On top of this, in 10th edition, they are actually pretty good. Their ability, Armored Spearhead, can give them full rerolls to hit. Now, if you are struggling for tank orders, that full rerolls to hit allows this unit to operate independently and not rely upon take aim. A lot of your other tanks will need that order, but with the full rerolls, this guy can just about get by without them. His main issue is that the main gun, the battle cannon, is only AP -1. In a lot of cover, that's going to be basically AP none. So combining this with Fields of Fire or Elite Exterminator is essential. But he is a good unit. I've taken them to tournaments, and it's always done well. Another iconic guard tank is the Demolisher, a favourite of editions past. You could not find a guard army without Demolishers in 8th and 9th. But I think that its sun is now setting. The random damage really is what puts me off. D6 damage is so swingy, and the fact that the thing is quite short range at 24 inches, you've got to put it in a risky position, and then for it to potentially just mess up and just like roll a bunch of 1s and 2s on its damage output, big no-no for me. So it's a decent vehicle, and hell, it hits like a brick shithouse with that strength 14 AP -3. But I am someone who puts a lot of stock in trade on flat damage 3. And so for me, the Demolisher is the tank of editions past. We then get to what is possibly the only downright bad tank in the motor pool, and that is the Leman Russ Vanquisher. It fires one shot. It hits on a 4+. Sure, if it stays still, it hits on a 3+. Sure, if it stays still and you put take aim on it, it hits on a 2+. You're never going to stay still because this is 10th edition, you need to be moving. And also, it's one shot. And it doesn't ignore invulnerable saves. It used to. In 9th edition, this thing was amazing. Vanquisher spam all the way. In 10th, you just hit someone who's got a 4+ invuln and your shot doesn't do anything. And every single time this thing fails to do any damage, that's 20% of its potential output that game just lost. But despite the fact that it's pretty trash, it does have two things that are in its favor. Firstly, it's anti-vehicle. Not actually anti-vehicle, not like the special rule anti-vehicle, but I mean like it's anti-tank. We are in a meta of tanks. The more anti-tank you can bring, the better. Weirdly, it's probably alright. But the big thing is, it's cheap. Oh my days, it's unbelievable cheap. 155 points for Russell is a steal. As far as I'm concerned, Vanquisher is totally usable. You don't even think about it in terms of its main weapon. You're spending 155 points for the defensive profile and all of the sponsors and hull weapons and heavy stubbers that you can get on it. And the main gun is just a Brucey bonus. I have used Vanquishers at a tournament. In 2 games, I was able to roll 4+ to hit, and they smashed the shit out of people. In 1 game, I did not roll 4+ to hit, and the unit was just tragically bad. So they are a fun tank, a cheap tank. You can pad your armor core out with them, but there are just ones which are much more reliable. Sadly, there is another Russ which isn't so hot, and that is the Leman Russ Punisher. This thing fires a ton of anti-infantry, but its mow down the enemy ability is lackluster when you actually do the maths on it. And it's all well and good being anti-infantry, but 10th edition is about vehicles and monsters, so it's just out of place. It's been good in previous editions, but I think for 10th, this thing's sitting it out. Like the Lehman Russ Demolisher, the Executioner is a tank of previous editions. Its best days are behind it. Big problem is that its weapon is only strength 8, its main gun. Just not enough. Not enough in 10th edition. We need weapons that are strength 10 or higher. So unfortunately, the Executioner, I think, is having a bit of a timeout. The same cannot be said for the best Lehman Russ variant right now, the Exterminator. Oh my god. The last time this thing was good was in 5th edition, and even then it got overshadowed by Hydras. That's how long the Exterminator has been waiting to be a good tank. And oh boy, is this thing incredible. You shouldn't leave home without one. You should spam 3 of them if you can. If you only take one kind of Russ in your army, it's the Exterminator. Firstly, its autocannon may only be strength 9, but it's twin linked, making it very good at wounding everything. It's also flat damage 3, which makes my PP hard. It fires out 8 shots in its ideal range, and it's a huge force multiplier with Withering Hail, essentially doing the same thing as Fields of Fire, although slightly better because it affects all Astra Militarum units, not just Regiment and Squadron. Great force multiplier, good defensive profile, fantastic main weapon, only 180 points, best Russ. The final Russ that we need to cast our ever critical eye over is the Eradicator. It's fun. It's a bit of a hidden gem. It's very reliable in terms of its number of shots. I have actually been on the receiving end of a few Eradicators now in a tournament setting, and it was pretty cool. But it struggles with killing vehicles. It's only strength 7. It's cheap though, 160 points, and I would probably take an Eradicator over a Vanquisher. But I think I would take an Exterminator or a Battle Tank over the both of them. So if you've got an Eradicator, it's alright, but there are clearly better variants. Now that just about covers all of our main battle tanks, but you would be sorely mistaken if you thought we were done on the firepower front. Now we need to go to the king of battle, artillery. We're going to start off with a good one, the Basilisk. I swear by the Basilisk. I think it is one of the best artillery pieces in the Guard, and maybe even the whole of 40k. Cheap at 135 points. Its Earthshaker cannon may only be strength 8, but we don't need to worry about that strength because of lethal hits. Very reliable number of shots, and can hit on 4s even without the support of orders, which is okay for artillery. Your direct damage dealers, they need to hit on 3s because often they're going to be getting firepower back, but your balance will be pounding away every single turn, so hitting on 4s to them is fine because over the course of the game they'll get the job done. The big thing about the Basilisk though is it's a force multiplier with its Earthshaker rounds. It slows your enemy down, it debuffs them. I have won games because of the Basilisk reducing my opponent's movement and advance and charge by 2. I had a unit of Death Guard Terminators drop in, fail their charge, and then for every single turn after that I hit them with the Basilisk and they moved 2 inches a turn. Even my opponent tried to advance, at best he was going like 3 inches a turn. Movement wins games, but it's not just about your own movement, it's about screwing with the enemy movement, and the Basilisk helps you do that. Technically not an artillery piece, but certainly a support vehicle, we have the Hydra. The Hydra is cool. It's 95 points, and it does put out some alright firepower. The issue with the Hydra is it's relatively low volume of shots. I wish it was like the Exterminator and it could get up to 8 shots, but it can't. It's pretty fragile compared to a lot of the Guard vehicles. And a lot of its stuff is like anti-fly, which is okay. There are a lot of flying stuff out there from infantry to vehicles, but it's okay. I think if the Hydra had rapid fire and it was the same points as it is now, even went up 5 points, it would be amazing. As it is, it's a cheap vehicle to pad out your armor pool, but otherwise it's a pass. Back to the artillery for a moment, and we have the Manticore. F in the chat for the Manticore. Beginning of 10th, this thing was the go-to, and it's not hard to see why. Strength 10, sure, lethal hits, but strength 10 as well. It's nice. Good to have both, right? Flat damage 3, indirect fire, potential to get full rerolls to hit. Yeah, good artillery piece. But now it costs 180 points. And that has essentially killed it. It's still good. And it's still flat damage 3. But I think most people are going to be leaving Manticores at home now. It was a smash. Now it's a pass. Speaking of pass, we have the Wyvern. Or the Wyvern. I'm never sure quite how to say it. We'll say Wyvern for now. It's an anti-infantry artillery piece, which is very expensive, which its ability only affects enemy infantry in an addition of vehicles. So it's pretty crap. However, this comment will definitely spur a load of people to go down to the comment section and go, think that LVO! Yeah, there was a list at LVO that went 6th, which had a Wyvern, and all I can say is LVO is a bit of a strange tournament because it's player-placed terrain, and also I wonder how far that guy would have gone if he hadn't taken a Wyvern. But as bad as the Wyvern is, it is not the worst support vehicle we have. That honor, dubious honor, goes to the Death Strike. Just fundamentally down to the atomic level shite. One shot that does nothing, and being a pale shadow of its awesome 9th edition self, the Death Strike is not even a meme, it's not even a dream, it's a bloody nightmare. If we still had the God Spear rocket from 9th, it would be at least a funny meme. But it's not. It's really not. The only thing the Death Strike has going for it is its anti-lone operative, which in certain situations can be really, really good. But otherwise, never, ever, ever take in any sort of serious situation. But from the downright terrible to the absolute incredible, we have the king of the metal boxes, the Chimera. Hands down, almost indisputably, the best transport in the entire game. It is cheap, it is decently fast, good defensive profile with 11 wounds, making it annoyingly durable, with a command firing deck on the back, allowing heavy weapons to shoot out the top, and bringing a lot of its own firepower. There is no downside to the Chimera. If you are thinking of taking mechanized in any form in your list, the Chimera is the transport you want to go to. On the other end of the spectrum, we have the Taurox. Low firepower, low durability, low reason to take it. It has got a 12-inch move. You can move, advance, and get out. So there is some very niche situations where you could put, Catachans in, and then it could scout, and it could zoom all over the place. But it's 60, 65 points. In almost any situation, you're going to want to have the Chimera. I tend to find in tournaments, you don't want to focus on what's good in a niche. You need to look at what's going to be good all the time. And so because Taurox is a niche, it's a pass. Technically not a dedicated transport, but it does have the capability of moving people around. We have the Valkyrie. The Valkyrie is a big shame because it's very cool and it's actually really durable. As far as flyers go, it's got one of the best defensive stat lines with a 2+ save and 40 wounds. It's basically a flying brick. But its ability is weird. I feel like it's a token ability, grab, shoot, insertion. It's like only for Scions essentially, but Scions will just want a deep strike. It can hover though, so it does get around a lot of the issues that flyers have, but it doesn't really have much anti-tank. Alone las cannon's not great. Missile pods are alright. It's just overpriced and doesn't bring a lot to the table. So the Valkyrie's a pass, unfortunately. Another pass is the Aegis defense line. This is a very complicated unit that is basically terrible. It can block people. You can use it to counter enemy charges, but you want to be moving up the board. So you don't want the Aegis defense line. It's something to hide behind. We don't want to hide. We want to drive them, men. And it can be destroyed. At least in the past it was invincible, but now it can be destroyed. Yeah, no. It is a bit of a meme unit, and 145 points. Nah. Fortunately, that gets us through the dark underbelly of all of the bad units in the main guard index. Trust me, there will be some more in the other indexes we look at in a moment, but for now, we're looking at good stuff. Let's look at some big guard tanks. Let's look at some super heavies. Now, as a whole, most of the guard super heavies are good. All of them have a lot of firepower. All of them are very durable. But there are some which are just better than others. And so some will be a pass just because they're overshadowed by their contemporaries. And in that camp, we have the Baneblade. Amazing firepower. The Marsh Cannon, the whole big boom on the Baneblade cannon, it's strength 12. But it's got quite swingy amount of damage output with the 3d6 on the Baneblade cannon. Sometimes that's just like 3 shots. Which is you don't want swingy when you've got a unit which is very expensive. And Rolling Fortress is kind of redundant because a lot of boards have just got a lot of terrain on them. So it's not hard to get a cover save in 10th. So like I said, fundamentally firepower, durability, but swingy gun, crappy ability. You then got the Bane Hammer, which has got a much more reliable weapon at 2d6 plus 3. And same sort of damage, strength 12, 8 minus 2, damage C. So the Bane Hammer is pretty decent, but its ability's crap. Basically force someone to take a battle shock test, or force multiple users to take a battle shock test. Psst, battle shock's rubbish. So again, good guns, better gun, arguably, than the main Baneblade cannon, but crappy ability, and there are, again, just better options. One of those better options is the Bane Sword. Oh. This gets me very excited. Is there a Bane Sword in my pants? I'm pleased to see you. It has got an amazing main weapon. Very reliable with d6 plus 6 shots. It also has a truly great ability. Armor Obliteration. It's the Obliteratum. When you destroy an enemy vehicle or monster, if any unit that's got the Deadly Demise ability, rather than blowing up on a 6, they blow up on a 3+. Its gun is strong, its gun is reliable, it's got a little bit low volume from the main weapon, but that's why you just stick 4 sponsors on it, right? They're free. It's also not overly, it's not like the most expensive option, and its ability is actually great. Bane Sword, definitely a good super heavy. You've got the Doom Hammer next. A lot of people like the Doom Hammer. I look at it and think it's terrible. It's probably the only actively bad guard super heavy. The Magma Cannon's only a 24-inch range, so it's got to get way too close to the front lines. It's got to risk itself. And then it fires like D6 plus 3 shots, which is like, it's not very many. The same as like a battle cannon. And it's then got swingy D6 damage. And yeah, it's got like Melter 6, but no. It's one of those units which consistently people send to me in like their army list. Like, Mordy, can you view my army list that I do on my live streams? And they go, and I say to them, you can include it, but it's not a good unit. But you can include it if you want to. And people will literally go, I'm going to try it. And I say, okay, try it this tournament you're going to. Come back and let me know how it does. And every single time, I'm not saying like most of the time, every single time someone has used the Doom Hammer and then come back and reported to me how it's done, they have said, Mordian, you were right, Doom Hammer is trash, I should have taken a Shadow Sword. Speaking of which, we have the aforementioned Shadow Sword. The best guard super heavy, downright competitive. 440 points. Yes, it only fires D3 plus 1 shots. At strength, 24 AP minus 5, flat damage 12, with the potential to do devastating wounds. I have used a Shadow Sword in many games, and every time it has impressed me. In fact, I strongly believe that terrain willing, double Shadow Sword is an actually competitive meta army. When you absolutely need to destroy an enemy unit, accept no substitutes over the Shadow Sword. Sadly, we cannot say the same for the Hellhammer. Suffers from a lot of the main issues that the Baneblade does, but its main weapon is even more swingy at 4d6, and it's only strength 7. So you're taking a very, very big guard super heavy to be good at smashing infantry in a vehicle meta and a monster meta. I've tried the Hellhammer. It was very, very disappointing. I would pass on it. The second to last super heavy is the Stormlord. This is a meme. It's a cool meme, but it's a meme. It suffers from the fact that it only has an anti-infantry weapon. It's all right, but I've used the Vulcan Mega Bolter on a Titan, and I've used it on a Stormlord, and both times it just sort of bounced off. AP-1 being a bit of a pisser. I suppose you can boost it with Withering Hail, but it's a super heavy. It should be able to look after itself, you know. The main thing that's cool about Stormlord is it can take a lot of people. It's got transport capacity of 40 models, and a lot of those can shoot out the top with its firing deck. 24 models can shoot out the top. The problem is, and also weirdly, you can have models that can get back inside it in your opponent's movement phase, which is just crazy. The issue is that the Stormlord is expensive, and then if you load it up to have like loads and loads of DACA coming out the top of it, it's getting more and more and more expensive. You can spend like 700 points making a Stormlord the ultimate DACA machine. That's really inefficient. So it's cool, but it's better on paper than in reality. But good news! The last super heavy is the best super heavy. The Storm Sword. It has an amazing main weapon with a reliable number of shots, d6 plus 6. Also has a reliable amount of damage, d6 plus 2. It's also strength 16, AP minus 4 with a 48-inch range. Just good all around, an incredibly solid stat line. And then its ability is also strong. The Concussive Wave allows you to do mortal wounds to enemy units that are near the original target. So if let's say you shoot an enemy squad and there's a bunch of units that are nearby, the enemy, after you finish shooting, the enemy squad will take some mortal wounds, and all the units around it will take mortals as well. It's just solid. And the Concussive Wave is like a fun extra, like it'll do a few mortals here and there, but the main reason is that gun, that Stormsword Siege Cannon, is just so damn tasty. That covers all of the Guard big ass tanks, but we do have 3 more data sheets to look at, and these are all your Tempestus Scions, the elite of the elite in the Guard. Funny side note, at one point Tempestus Scions had their own codex. It was a codex that had about 3 or 4 data sheets in it. I think it was command squads, commissars, Tempestus Scion units, Torx Primes, and Valkyries. It had five data sheets for a codex. It's almost as bad as the Votan. Now, Scions are really good. I've been singing their praises from the beginning of 10th edition. The command squads are very, very flexible. A lot of the benefits that the normal command squads have. But what's really cool is their ability gives them sustained hits. But not just them, the unit that you attach them to. So you can have a 15-man Scion unit maxed out with loads of special weapons and also start getting sustained hits. When you combine this with the main Scion datasheet, not the command squad, but the actual Tempestus Scions, and their Stormtroopers, which allows you to get full rerolls, you can generate a buttload of sustained hits from these guys. And having full rerolls is an amazing ability. Having just built-in Ballistic Skill 3+ is awesome. Being able to hit on 2s with these guys just with Take Aim, being able to get full rerolls and loads of shots with first rank fast rank fire. This is probably the only unit where going first rank fast rank fire is the better option, just because of you've already got the rerolls. Yeah, just Scions, command squads are great. I've done loads of videos on these guys and how potent they are. The only stinker in the Scion lineup is the Torx Prime. It's 90 points, which makes it the most expensive guard transport, and it's not very durable. T8 with only 10 wounds, I've run them. They just pop. They pop and they pop and they pop. This makes it really difficult to use their fire support ability because they're expensive and then they just sort of die. Fire support is okay, but Deep Striking Scions is the way to do it. If you want to mechanize your Scions, you take Chimeras. I've tried Torx Primes competitively. I've tried Chimeras with Scions competitively, and the Chimeras were the superior option every day of the week. Some people get sucked in by the Torok's Prime because they think it's got good anti-tank. The Torok's crack rockets are a joke. They don't do anything. And the autocannon, it's just not got the volume of fire. Unlike the Exterminator, which can have like 8 shots twin linked, the 2 shots from the twin linked Torok's autocannon just no. So then you really sort of go towards the anti-infantry options, but Scions don't struggle with anti-infantry because of all the plasma and stuff that they can bring. Yeah, they were great. They're kind of like the Demolisher, you know? They were great, but now they are an echo. Now that covers everything in the main guard index, but we actually have 2 more indexes to draw from. That's right, guard has so many damn data sheets. It's what makes us so good. We've got always something to pivot to be flexible with, a new unit to take the place of another one that gets nerfed. The other 2 indexes are for Forge World units. Now Forge World is the sister company of GW. It makes a lot of special units out of resin, but they are all totally legal for tournament play. There are some like Legends data sheets which we won't be looking at today. We're looking at what we can use from sort of a competitive point of view, but all the Forge World stuff is totally legal. You can find it all in the app, and you can also find it on the GW website. I highly encourage all of you to look at these Forge World units. Do not dismiss them out of hand. Some of our best stuff is in here. Speaking of good units, we have the Deathcore Marshal, the best unnamed guard character we have. Better than the Cadian Castellum by miles. And the big reason for this is while he is leading a unit, that unit has a 5+ feel no pain. This will make your infantry unbelievably. I have had an opponent shoot down a unit of Catachans without even sparing a thought. They then put the same firepower into a Deathcore unit led by a Marshal, and they've barely scratched it. I've had an Avessa Assassin charge into a unit of Deathcore and kill one guy because of the 5 feel no pain. It's very, very, very good. Also, you can use the same Bravery Stratagem for free, which is a good way of saving some CP. And he's got a 5% vulnerable save, and he's got 4 wounds, and he's not half bad in combat with 4 attacks at strength for 8-2, 1 damage. And when he's leading a unit of Deathcore, he gets the benefit from their Grim Demeanor, so actually hits in 2s in combat, and he can hit on 2s with the Plasma Pistol as well. There are literally no downsides to this guy. He is 60 points, but he's worth every penny. Another Krieg unit is the Death Rider Squadron. In my opinion, these are the superior cavalry. They're a lot less swingy than Rough Riders, and they do everything that the Rough Riders do. They also have a great ability screening line, which lets you mess around with opponents' movement. Like they try and move towards you, you can move block them, or you can fall back from them. Yeah, it's really good. And unlike the sort of Termagant skulking ability, it's not a random dice roll, you just get a full 6-inch move. This can help you get onto objectives, it can help you foil enemy charges. It's just a great ability. The problem with Death Riders, they kind of fall into the same traps as Rough Riders, which is terrain isn't so favourable to them. But screening line does give them a little extra bonus to mobility, so they're totally usable. For me, they are actually a smash. There's also a leader for the Death Riders, the Squadron Commander. He's a pass. People may be very surprised when I say this. He does do orders, and he gives them devastating wounds, and he allows them to infiltrate. The thing is, cavalry is good when it's taken cheaply and used as a screen. The moment you add a Death Rider Squadron Commander on them, they become much more expensive. So I would leave him at home. The only time when you want to start spamming Death Rider Squadron Commanders is if you're going full cavalry. That is a somewhat viable meme list, but it's a very niche scenario. Another pass is the Carnodon. This is actually a tank from 30k, which we can use in 40k. And it's not very good. It's an alright defensive stat line, 2+ save, 12 wounds, but it's just lacking in any real damage output. A few auto cannons here, a few las cannons there, a bit of a crappy ability. Yeah, leave the Carnodon at home. But what you absolutely want to take in your list every single time, auto include, is the Cyclops Demolition Vehicle. Now, you might look at this thing and think it's terrible. I look at this thing and think it's incredible. I don't care about its stat line. I don't care about its ability. I'm going to take all of the bombs out and put teleporter homers inside. This is 25 points. Put it in strategic reserve, bring it in, turn 2, turn 3, score engage in all fronts, score behind enemy lines, score teleporter homer. It's incredible. Auto include, I never leave home without them. But moving on to some proper forgeable tanks, we have the Malkador. Actually really good. Its battle cannon is a little weaker than the main battle cannon, but it's still D6 plus 3 shots, makes it reliable. It's still got flat damage 3. The great thing about the Malkador is that it can take 3 las cannons. This gives it proper anti-tank, something that you Russes can struggle with a little bit. Also, rugged reliability means that it's really durable, combining that with its 2+ save and its 18 wounds. The only downside of the Malkador is it is expensive, but I did take 2 of them to a tournament and I found them very effective. But on the total opposite end of the spectrum, we have the Malkador Annihilator. It is worse in every single way. Do not take it. You've also got the Malkador Defender, which would be a great unit if the Armored Defender ability wasn't trash and it wasn't 310 points, making it more expensive than a Rogel Dawn. Defender, bad. Annihilator, bad. Main Malkador, good. Another good Malkador is the Infernus. Some people will be very surprised to hear me say this. I'm not saying it's a smash. In fact, it probably is a pass. But you can Overwatch with it. So this means that its 18-inch range, pretty decent flamer, is often firing twice a turn. That really ups the amount of damage it can do. You shouldn't really be thinking about this as doing D6 plus 3 shots. You should be thinking about doing 2d6 plus 6 shots. When you start putting it in that perspective, it's okay. You've also got the fact that when it dies on a 3+, it can shoot. So there is a potential for this thing to fire 3 times in one round. That's a lot of Bernie. Now, when you take the Infernus, your natural inclination is going to be to give it 2 flamers for the sponsons, because then it's like maximum burn. It's not a bad option, but I actually think the better choice is 2 las cannons, because then it can handle infantry Bernie, and it can actually help somewhat with the anti-tank. From tanks to artillery, we have the Earthshaker Carriage Battery. It's a Basilisk. It's not as durable, it doesn't move as good, but it's essentially a Basilisk. Very good unit. Everything I said about the Basilisk really applies here. Absolute smash. In the same boat, we have the Medusa Carriage Battery, or as it was recently nicknamed on one of my live streams, the Medusi. I both love and hate that nickname. The Medusi is the spiritual successor, is the inheritor to the Manticore. It is strength 10. It's flat damage 3. It's even got better AP at -3. The only issue is that it's only D6 shots, but I'll be totally real with you. D6 plus 1 and D6, in reality, very different. Very little difference. I've rolled a 1 on my Manticore, and let me tell you, firing 2 shots from it didn't feel any better. It's just a swingy. So the only real disadvantage is the 36-inch range. This will mean in certain situations the Medusi won't be able to hit the enemy backfield objective, and so you won't be able to sort of threaten the 5 incestors that will be inevitably hanging back there. But it's more than enough to fight in the middle ground, to clear those objectives that are in the mid, hidden by ruins. So it's still good. Don't rely on Medusas solely. If you're going heavy artillery, go for a mixture of Medusis and Basilisks / Earthshakers, and you'll be fine. But it's a clear smash. But from artillery, back to tanks. It's a bloody roller coaster in here. We have the Stormblade. This is a super heavy, very much in line with the rest of the things like Bane Blades and Shadow Swords. Same defensive profile, a lot of the same weapon options as well, in terms of like sponsors and all that kind of good stuff. The big gun on the Stormblade is the Plasma Blast Gun. This is decent. It's not great, not terrible. 3.6. D6 plus 3 shots. Strength 9, AP2, damage 3, but you can overcharge it, and it's D6 plus 3 strength 10, 8-3, damage 4. Now bear in mind you have 24 wounds. You can get away with overcharging this. 1 in 6 times it'll hurt itself. And there's only 5 turns in a game. So you're not even guaranteed statistically to like get a 1 for the hazardous check. And even if you do, you've got a lot of wounds to absorb it. So I actually think that you just overcharge this thing non-stop. And that gives it that flat damage 4, which is nice. The other thing is, its ability does help improve its damage output as well. Each time this model makes a ranged attack with a Stormblade Plasma Blast gun that targets you within half range, you can reroll the hit. So you've got a reliable number of shots, half range 24 inches, 4 rerolls, good AP, good damage. Only real weakness is the strength 10, means that heavy armor or heavier medium armor, anything toughness 11 and above, is going to start being a bit of a crap fest. But toughness 10 and below, you will blast away. Oh, and also it's the cheapest super heavy at 415 points, which is an absolute bargain. It's a smash, but I would still take a Shadow Sword over it, but the Stormblade is definitely a smash. But then we get to the big sad. My favorite tank in all of Warhammer, the Macarius and its variants, are all kind of trash. They're all pass. Macarius is a light super heavy, which is kind of funny to think about. It's got a good defensive profile. It's got that toughness 13. It's only got 20 wounds though, rather than 24. The defensiveness is not the issue. The weapons. You've got the twin battle cannon, which is basically just like a regular battle cannon with twin linked, but it's got like heavy stubbers, heavy bolters as its sponsons. And its ability is just a bit. You got to sit on an objective for you to get reroll ones. Like what? No, I want full reroll shooting someone else on an objective. I don't want to be sitting around. I want to be plowing forward. So you've got a bit of a crap gun, a bit of a crap ability, and then this thing costs more than a Rogal Dawn. There is no reason why you would ever take Macarius over a Dawn. Macarius was a bit cheaper, maybe the same price as a Dawn, maybe, but even then, it's got one reason to take it. It's fine as hell. But the other variants, like the Vanquisher, suffer from the same issue. The Vanquisher is a super heavy that fires one shot from its big ass Vanquisher cannon. It's like, what? I'm firing one shot from a super heavy. And then the Vulcan is cool because it does get a lot of shots. It does fire 16 shots, similar to the Stormlord. It's actually the same weapon profile, just a few less shots. But we're in a vehicle meta. So your primary weapon being anti-infantry, as we've seen so many times in this video, is not the right way to go. So the Macarius it wins the prize of Rule of Cool, but it loses in actually being good. Now we've had tanks, we've had super heavies, and we've had artillery, but we have not combined all three into one. We have the biggest artillery piece, the biggest indirect fire you can take, the Praetor. Strictly, it's not a super heavy, but it is the same size as some of them, so I like to believe it's at least in spirit a super heavy artillery piece. Now it's got the same profile as a Macarius. It's toughness 11, 18 wounds, super save. The thing with the Praetor is it has two types of indirect fire. It's got the Firestorm and the Foehammer. Firestorm is strictly anti-infantry. Foehammer is kind of anti-everything. It's anti-monster, literally 4+, anti-vehicle, literally 4+. And what's cool is it hits on 4s with heavy, but if you give it an order, then it does not suffer the penalty for firing indirect, which means that this thing goes from hitting on a 4 to hitting on a 2. Artillery hitting on a 2, by just giving it the order you want to give it anyway, take aim, is quite tasty. I have been on the receiving end of a Praetor. It was uncomfortable. It wasn't devastating. It wasn't mind-boggling. It didn't make me want to rush out there and 3D print one. Sorry, Forge World. But it wasn't useless. The only bad thing about this is the price tag, both on Forge World, and also in-game with points. It's like 250 points, something mad. Might even be more than that. It's a decent unit. The gun is good. The rule is good. The points are bad. It's a pass. But coming in with a big old smash is the Crassus. This is our biggest transport outside of the Stormlord. And I would actually argue the Stormlord is a super heavy first and a transport second. So I'm going to commit to it. It's our biggest transport. Same defensive profile as a lot of the big tanks we've been looking at. T11, wounds 18, 2+ save. It can transport an entire goddamn platoon. 35 infantry. It's also, unlike the Torx Prime, actually going to get there, but it actually has the same ability that Torx Prime has. So you can have 35 people pile out the Crassus and have 4 rolls to wound. Oh, that's something else. Combine this with the fact that you can now do orders when you get out of a transport, and you could have you could have Scions jumping out, like 30 of them. Very expensive, but you could do it. Jumping out with like 4 rerolls to hit, 4 rolls to wound with melter guns. But you could take 2 Scion Gigablobs and put them in a Crassus and do this. The only reason you wouldn't is a lot of eggs in one basket. What I think you're more likely to do is to take a bunch of like Deathcore of Krieg or something, which are a bit cheaper, which still get a lot of special weapons, and do the same thing. But yeah, I think the Crassus is actually legit because it's not so expensive. It's only like 180 points, which for that much transport capacity in one spot is decent. I would say if you're someone that likes mech, drop 2 Chimeras, search down the back of the couch for some spare points, pop a Crassus in there. It's a smash. But the roller coaster keeps on rolling from smash to pass, and we are back to a pass with the Colossus. The Colossus should be good. It fires D6 shots, bit swingy, but that's okay. We can spam them. They weren't too expensive. They do devastating wounds. They've got D6 plus 2 damage. Strength 6 minus 1. The anti-monster 5+, anti-vehicle 5+. There's a lot going on that would make this good, except it's not indirect fire when it really should be, and yet it got nerfed along with all the other indirect fire units. Clearly it's meant to be indirect because it got nerfed in the literally named indirect fire towering nerf, and yet it is not indirect fire. So it's a big pass because it makes me sad. And speaking of passes, we do have one more from this particular index, first Forge World index, and it is the Valdor Tank Hunter. This thing ain't hunting shit. It ain't hunting tanks. It ain't hunting anything. The only thing this thing is hunting is the shelf it's going to spend the entire edition on. It is, without a doubt, the worst super heavy and possibly even the worst unit that we have. I have nothing more to say. It's a pass. Now that would be a very sad note to end the video on, but fortunately there's more, because there's another index. My god, we've had 1 index, we've had 2, but what about 3rd index? This next one covers a lot of the flyers and some of the other kooky units. We've seen some pretty crazy ones, but these are getting real quirky. We shall begin with the Avenger Strike Fighter. This so wants to be a smash, but the aircraft rules in 10th edition, doesn't matter if it's a strike fighter or whatever, the aircraft rules 10th edition are so tragically bad that I can't help but feel that someone was having a grudge against flyers. Show me on the doll where the aircraft touch. That's what I'm thinking here. So let's take it as read that all the flyers are pass. All right. But there are some in there that, if just on their own merits, on their data sheets, deserve to be a smash. So we're going to go through, and we know all the fires are bad, but we're going to go through and say which ones that we like and which ones we think are just really, really bad. Now the Avenger gets a pseudo smash, as it were. It's got a good gun, and it can handle a variety of targets, and it's dirt cheap at 130 points. Its ability is rubbish, but the big bolt cannon and the las cannons make it very flexible. We've also got the Voss pattern lightning, which I think is the best of our forge. It's actually probably our best flyer. The Voss pattern lightning is our best flyer. It is only 130 points, dirt cheap again, and it's hella anti-tank. 2 las cannons, and the lightning hellstrike rack. And even though it's pretty fragile at only toughness 9, it does have -1 to hit, which makes it actually a bit more durable than it may first appear. Then got the Thunderbolt Heavy Fighter, which I want it to be a smash. I want it to be, but it's going to have to be a pass, and then a proper pass as well. It's tough. It's got firepower, and its ability is wild spit situational. Not so bad. You get some extra hits against flying units. A lot of flying units, even the ones on the ground. It's too expensive. Its points cost is too prohibitive. So unfortunately, it gets the pass. The Vulture gets a pseudo smash. The Dakka is really, really good. And I have actually used them in a competitive sense, and they were okay. Yes, the meta isn't right for them. Yes, they are overpriced. Yes, they do suffer from being an aircraft, but they can hover, and there is nothing like rolling so many goddamn Gatling cannon shots. And even in a vehicle heavy meta, being able to lay down some serious anti-infantry firepower and use them in a pseudo indirect fire roll as well, because they can come from strategic reserve, like deep striking and whatnot. I think that the Vulture can be usable, but you shouldn't spam them, and at best you're going to put 1 in your list without tying your hand behind your back. But it's very on the line between smash and pass. I could easily flip back to it being pass. The Marauder Bomber is in contention with the Valdor for being the absolute worst. It's a pass. I don't even want to look at it. And then we've got the Marauder Destroyer, which is the hotter, younger cousin of the Marauder Bomber, which is actually good. Like, just fundamentally, it's good. It's just too expensive. 375 points means that it's going to cut a lot into your points allowance, and that's we're getting to the stage where you might have to take a proper super heavy. So it's a pass, but it gets an honorary mention as being damn cool. That does cover all of the flyers, but we then have some more ground poundy goodness, and we have the Tarantula Battery. It's a turret. It can't move. It only hits on 4s, and the only way you could order it is with the Lord Solar, which would be a gross overspend on his order to bloody tell him to tell a turret what to do. They're a pass. There are better options. They have las cannons, they have heavy bolters. You can use Overwatch for free. But the thing is, it's going to be a pass, and that's because there are much better options out there, such as the Rapier Laser Destroyer. These are a smash. I really, really need to get around to 3D printing myself some of these bad boys. They're anti-tank, and they can receive orders from infantry officers because they're regiment, and they're twin-linked. So, and they fire 2 shots each, and they're only 35 points each. It's basically like a it does the same role as a Sentinel, but just you're not paying for all that expensive armor. So yeah, it's gonna die. It's gonna die like shit, of course. But it is 2 shots at strength 12, AP -2, D6 damage with twin linked. It only has 1 issue, ballistic skill 5+. So you need take aim to make it hit on a 4, and if you want to hit on a 3, you'd have to stay still. That is rough, but I will happily spend 35 points on double lads cannons hitting on 4s with 4 rolls to wound. Sure. Yeah, it's a smash. Really, really good. Seriously being slept on. After that, we have a bit of a meme unit, the Hades Breaching Drill. It wants to be good. It's weirdly durable, and it's got a pretty good combat profile, and it allows you to deep strike any Astra Militarum infantry that can't actually deep strike. So you can have ogres like popping up and like blasting people, and entire platoons of guardsmen sprouting out of the ground. It's 110 points. That is so overcosted, it makes me sick. If it was 60, I would take it. But it's almost double that. So unfortunately, it's shelved here. And last, and somewhat least, we have the Trojan Support Vehicle. Not an unusably bad vehicle. Basically, pick one of your friendly vehicles and give it reroll 1s. It kind of competes with the Sentinel, with the Scout Sentinel. But reroll 1s just aren't as mandatory as they once were. In 9th edition, everyone and their mum was fishing for rerolls. Now it's like if you get them, you get them. If you don't, you don't. I think it's cool, but at 80 points, I think it's probably a bit too expensive. But you could put one in your list and not feel like you were totally weighing yourself down. But most people will be happy to not bother. And that covers all of our indexes, army rules, and data sheets. But for the sake of completeness, to try and make sure we've got everything in one place, I do want to go over all of the other little bits. You see, Warhammer 10th edition is often getting updated with Munitorum field manuals and balanced data slates and FAQs, and there are just a few tidbits that I think are important to cover here. So firstly, if you look at the voice of command ability in the main index, it will actually be out of date. You want to go over to the balanced data slate, and I'll make sure that there is a copy of this down in the description below. And in there is an update to voice of command. And it states, if your army faction is Astra Militarum, officer models with this ability can issue orders. Each officer data sheet will specify how many orders it can issue and which units are eligible to receive those orders. Each time an officer model issues an order, select one of the following below. Move, blah, blah, blah. Then select one eligible friendly within 6 inches of the officer model to issue it to. Officer, this is the important bit. Officer models can issue orders in your command phase and at the end of a phase in which they disembark from a transport or were set up on the battlefield. So what this means is, if you get out of a transport, even though it's not the command phase, you can still do an order. If you come in from strategic reserve, even though it's not the command phase, you can do an order. When your officer, it comes on the board from one source or another, he can do the orders. If they were on the board at the beginning of the turn, they do the orders in the command phase. This is really useful because it means that you can have units come in from strategic reserve and they can get orders such as Scions deep striking down or Kazakin with officers attached to them like Helens. And also is quite cool because there's some advanced tactics you can do with having units come back from using the reinforcement stratagem, and then gaunts, ghosts, or officers coming in from strategic reserve and being able to give them orders there as well. So it makes the voice of command ability, which is already amazing, even better. And then the final I to dot and T to cross, we have the datasheet FAQ. Now, GW has done their very best to hide this and make it difficult to find. When you go to like the FAQ section on their website, it's just all under this one document called index cards. It doesn't say FAQ or errata or anything like that. It's a bit crappy. So I'll make sure there's a link to this down in the description as well, just to make it easy for people to find. In here, they've basically corrected some of the mistakes that have been on the data sheets for all factions, and there's a segment for the Astra Militarum. The first bullet point is regarding the Aegis defense line, and all this does is tell you the exact composition of the unit, how many segments there are, how many longies, how many shorties, how many broken shield sections, how many platforms. The next one adds a asterisk to the Astra Militarum infantry armory card, and it says if this weapon equipped by a Militarum Tempestus model, it has a ballistic skill characteristic of 3+. Basically, the armory card didn't have the same info on it as the main Scion data sheet. If it's a Scion, it's got a BS3+, easy to remember. You've then got the Astra Militarum vehicle card, Exterminate autocannon weapon ability. Change that to Rapid Fire 4 Twin Linked. Again, there was some information that was missing. The armory card was wrong. The main data sheet was right. A lot of people don't even know about this kind of stuff just because you just go off the main data sheet anyway. The Cadian Castellan has a melee weapon profile added to it, which is the ability to add a close combat weapon. So if you have your Cadian Castellan and you give him like just a basic combat weapon, for some reason, I don't know why you would, you're always going to give him a Power Fist because the Power Fist is just better, but you can give him a basic combat weapon now. Also, there's another bit for the Cadian Castellan that says unit composition second line, change this to the models equipped with the las pistol, chainsword, and close combat weapon. So I guess there was a bit of a quirk around you could like give him only guns so he couldn't fight in combat. I guess that's what this is fixing. You've then got Death Core of Krieg, war gear options, change second bullet point to for every 10 models of this unit, one Death Core Lasgunner can have a Voxcaster or a Plasma Gun, and you can't replace the model's Lasgun. Basically, you can have a Voxcaster dude or a Plasma. gun dude per 10, but you can't have both. And then you've got another bullet point that just clarifies that you can have one Deathcore trooper equipped with a lasgun and a medipack. If you actually look at the main datasheet for Deathcore, it didn't specify how you got the medipack. The unit had one, but didn't say how many. Now we know that you just get the one. There's a designer's note for the heavy weapon team in the infantry squad, saying it counts as 2 models for the purpose of war gear. This just clarified a bit of a confusion at the beginning of the edition, where does a heavy weapon team count as 1 or 2 models, because it matters for determining how many heavy and special weapons you can take. It's all cleared up. For every 10 models in an infantry squad, you can have 1 heavy and 1 special weapon and a Voxcaster dude and a sergeant. So a 20-man unit will have 2 heavy weapons, 2 special weapons, 2 Voxcasters and 2 sergeants, and then a bunch of lasgun guys. Like with the Caden Castellan, we've got the Ogun Bodyguard getting a close combat weapon attached to his profile. Apparently that was missing. And then there's a bullet point saying to the Rattling Snipers, add the Rattling keyword. That doesn't affect anything. It's just good to know that Rattlings are indeed Rattlings. Torx Prime changed the missile launcher frag strength to 4. If you look at the original datasheet, it actually says strength 8, which is hilarious. Best frag rockets in the game. But actually, they're not strength 8, they're strength 4. And lastly, when we did mention this earlier when I was talking about Creed, there is an update to Creed saying that her tactical genius ability can only be used on 1 regiment unit within 12 inches, not any unit. So you can't have like a Lemus Exterminator shoot an enemy and then get Withering Hail and then for free use Creed to put Fields of Fire. You'd have to have the Exterminator do it, and then Creed would have to give Fields of Fire to a bunch of infantry that are in the same area. And that, ladies, gentlemen, and small furry creatures from Alpha Centauri, is the Imperial Guard in 10th. Overall, a clear smash. Some of you might think I'm being very biased, and I'll admit I am. I love the Guard, but even looking at it subjectively, I think they're a smash. You will notice that with a lot of the datasheets I was saying, they're good, they're not bad, they're just a better option. Pretty much all the Guard datasheets, barring maybe a dozen out of hundreds of ones that we have access to, are good. There's like a few that are actively bad, but most of them are very, very solid. And you can build a huge variety of army lists using these indexes, and all of them will be pretty decent. So it's a good smash. You got good army rules, good stratagems, bad detachment rule, but that will change when the codex comes out, I hope. The enhancements are a bit bad, but one of them is very, very good. But this faction is getting carried by a really solid core of datasheets. And I think that's the most important thing when it comes to an army. You have all the fancy rules you want, you have all the different detachments you want, but if your datasheet's just tragic, just fundamentally non-functional, or just kind of crappy, it doesn't really matter. But you can have some lackluster overall rules if the individual datasheets are, pardon the pun, smashing it. But of course, all of this is just like my opinion, man. Let me know what you think down in the comments section below. Are there any verdicts that you disagree with? Please let me know. And also, if I missed anything, put it down in the comment section and I'll keep an eye on it, and I'll put a pinned comment at the top with any little bits that I might have missed, because I really do want this to be quite a useful resource for Guard players. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, smash that like button, subscribe to never miss an episode, and all of that good stuff. Would you like to know more? If so, then please consider becoming a channel member or patron. By supporting the channel, not only will you be doing your part, but you'll also be helping me create more content for your viewing pleasure and unlocking a whole host of perks. You get everything from a badge next to your name, custom emojis, but the big one is access to the Mordian Glory Discord server, an online community with almost 2,500 active members. It's always popping off in the MG Discord. We've got channels for army lists, hobbying, tactics, stories, and even a pretty spicy meme section as well. For all you greenhorns that wanted to see the Mordian glory hole, today is your lucky day. And joking aside, I do want to say a massive thank you to all of the current channel members and patrons. You guys are amazing. Truly the lifeblood of the channel. I could not do Mordian Glory full-time without the incredible and generous support of my members. So thank you guys so much. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a personal thank you to all of my top tier Patreons. These are the War Masters, the people who have truly gone above and beyond the call of duty. So a heartfelt thank you to Alex Dengal, Bon Vert, Mad Larkin, Marcus Roberts, Mark Panconi, RJ Scorpion, Swordfish Trombone, Try Again Bragg, John Stubbs, Nick Walsh, Diesel Fox, and August Varney. Seriously guys, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your support is incredible and it makes a huge difference. Thank you so much. That's all for now. Hope you've all enjoyed today's video, and of course, as always, see you guys next time.